picture of him. And this is, basically, the tourists come there and they have the stores and the shops and stuff like that. This is, they fixed it up very nice for the Cuban people.
So there's that statue back there. You can't really see it too well, but is that the one that's a sailor or something? It's transgender dress. So Cuba's wrestling with the same thing we wrestle with in our country. You know, Russia's not in favor of anything like that, so they're very strong against it. But Cuba's wrestling with that, and that statue there was a transgender person. So it's kind of fascinating how American culture is trickling out to other parts of the world and impacting them as well.
Here I am. I'm pointing to the area that we are in Cuba, Holguin. You can see there. This is broken up into all the different states in Cuba, and I'm just pointing to the area that we're in at the time. Again, this is part of I'm going to call it like a central park that they have in the area that we're at. And here's a statue of one of the generals that fought for Cuban's independence several hundred years ago.
Those nicer buildings are pre-communist era. The really nice stuff was pretty much put in place before the communist era came in. After that, pretty much nothing really beautiful came in. It's just, it kind of robbed the country of its cultural resources and put it down on pretty bare minimum living levels.
There's some churches, very old churches. This is one of the Catholic churches that I saw in the area that I thought was the architecture. My degree is in drafting design. I just love to see architecture and stuff like that. And I just loved like the arches and dome here. Same thing here. This is the car, another view of the president's conference car. Here's the whole car. As you can see, the window's been darkened. Again, I didn't realize it. The bus is not air conditioned, but the car is. So. Oh, excuse me. This is the bus. It looks like a short bus, but actually it would fit quite a few of us in there. Usually like 15 people, and plus our equipment. Everywhere we went, of course, we carried all of our equipment back and forth, our saws, our levels, our trowels, or whatever, and we load them up on this bus, and somehow, along with our water, usually everywhere we went, Cuba is very hot, and our standards, well, it's about the same as it is right here now, while we were there, about 80 to 95 most of the time, and so we carry about between 10 and 15 gallons of water with us everywhere we went, and you sweat it out. Mm-hmm. Right, Jeremiah?
That's right. I thank God for the wind, though. The breeze that come in off the coast was very helpful.
This is just a sunset in Cuba. This is I call it the Cuban open market. This gentleman has garlic hanging over his shoulder, and he's carrying it around, and he's yelling. I do not know the Spanish word for garlic. But he'd call around and he'd call out about garlic, and he'd be selling people on the street, walking around, selling people garlic, these big braided pieces of garlic and stuff like that. I have a son-in-law who's a very good cook. He says, I wish I could get some of that purple garlic. So I never thought of anything about it.
Well, John, you got to tell us about this girl.
So this is Yaima. Sorry, Yaima, if you're listening to this and I'm butchering your name. She is the secretary of the local church, I believe, and her husband also works for the conference there. But she has a ministry called Smiles, and what they do is they go into the local oncology, so cancer hospital for kids, and hand out stickers and sing with the kids, and she dresses up as a clown. And one thing that really struck me about her, first of all, yes, is always her smile, but also just how much she knew about her community in the area. She helped us to divide the food that we gave out to some of the people in the area. So she's just a multitasker that's a very hard worker for Jesus.
Mm-hmm. She did a lot of cooking for us. Those guys are cooking like 6:30, 7 a.m. in the morning, and sometimes we came home late. They were still there at 9:30 at night, taking care of us. Really amazing. So you'll probably see more of the kitchen crew as we go along. She's a great kid, I gotta tell you. And one of the things we're doing is we're collecting things like stuffed animals and stuff like that to send back. And we have a crate shipping back there coming up, in, I think, in the end of October to Cuba. And we're collecting. Well, you'll see a list. There's a list, but we're collecting, and some of it is the idea that we can provide. We did actually. Tammy brought in a couple plastic bags full of stuffed animals, and she took them with her to the hospital to give the kids. They don't get that stuff over there. To have that, that little stuffed animal, and to be able to hold on to that, it means a lot to them. So those little things, boy, that's just a real awesome touch for them.
This is Yaman all the time. She's always got this big smile on her face, always singing songs. She's really impressive. Here, the folks when we were there, this is the lady who did our clothes, and we would literally set our clothes aside. We'd write our name on a bag, set our names in our clothes in a hallway, and this lady would, by the time we got back from wherever we were at, our clothes would be clean and folded and in a bag in our room, when we got back on a daily basis.
How many of you guys here are Pathfinders or want to go into Pathfinders? So she is also the Pathfinder director for Holguin and also a couple of other states. And she got to go to Jamaica this year for our Pathfinder get-together for the leaders of the Pathfinder clubs. So
Inter-American
she just
division,
touched my
actually.
heart because
Yeah.
of her hard work. I mean, even though she's the Pathfinder director, she did what Pathfinders do best and served us, which was just such a blessing.
So the challenge is that when we work doing concrete and stuff like that, it gets in our pants. It doesn't come out easy. That's why she's doing the scrubber. They don't have much in the way of, what do they call that? Detergents, soaps. They don't have much in the way of that. They got water there, but they don't have much in the way of soaps to clean stuff out. So it was a labor of love because she had to work hard to get that concrete out of our pants every day.
So I heard from her and a couple of the people that in the last year or so, it's been very difficult to get a hold of soap. Dish soap, human soap, washing soap. So imagine cleaning your house with just water. You're not cleaning yourself it's just water. And they were very creative in ways to get water to do things to make it just beautifully clean for us.
So one of the things we're collecting is soap to send on our crate over there. So
This is our dining hall, and all while we're there, every morning before we took off and went to the site, we'd all gather together, we'd sing a few songs, we'd have a worship together. That varied from time to time, depending on how early we started. Some mornings we started before daylight, and also every evening we'd have a worship when we came in, which sometimes was after dark also. But you can see the beautiful dining hall that we had. It was just fantastic. A good place to sit down and worship. It sort of had a nice echo, so when you sang, we actually sounded good. So, as you can tell, my voice was not a singing type voice, but it was just great. Again, this was a great place where we could meet and talk, and Rich would also give us an idea of what was going on during that day. And one of his statements that I already used this morning, or this afternoon, was Rich would say, he goes, "I always have a plan, but it's flexible. So everything could change without notice."
highly structured but flexible.
Yep. Here's the ladies that are cooking, and it's sort of interesting. When we first got there, they had a 100-pound cylinder full of LP gas, and this is where Cuba is sort of unique to it, and we Americans have a hard time grasping. They had a 100-pound cylinder for cooking for us. After about 10 days, they ran out of gas. Of LP gas, and our first response is, okay, let's go and get some more. And it's like, you don't understand, when they're out of gas, that means there isn't any available until something happens, and then a ship comes in and brings in more or something like that. And so but the Cuban people, being how they are, is they move forward, and like immediately they had these grills set up, and they started using charcoal to cook our meals on and stuff like that. They don't stop. It's like, oh, that's not a big deal. We're just going to cook on charcoal. And they keep on moving forward. And I thought, wow, how innovative on their part. They're prepared. They don't let anything stop them. They just keep on going on. They know they got to keep on moving.
And if you're going to get gas, you're going to stand in line for hours to get gas, like up to 6 hours sometimes. And you might get there and they might be out. So you just wasted a lot of time.
This is what our meals looked like on an average. It varied a little bit. Usually every day we had fresh tomatoes, we had fresh cucumbers, we had black beans. One occasion we had pinto beans, which most of the time is black beans. They had some potatoes. They also have a sweet potato that is white. The white part, and I'm not familiar. Usually most of the sweet potatoes we have in the U.S. are orange colored, but their sweet potatoes were white. Very, very good, but it's just unique. They had I'm not sure what kind of bread it was. It looked like a French bread that was almost toasted. And then they had this sauce on there that was made out of garlic and onions and a blend. And I sort of really, really like this stuff. And so I was, on a normal basis, especially on breakfast, I would take this sauce, I'd put it on there, put on some eggs with some tomatoes and cucumbers and eat it. And it's just a fantastic breakfast. It's my personal Egg McMuffin, if you will.
I will say the folks down there were so amazing. They gave us their best, their absolute best, and everything. And the food they served us was incredible. In the quantities of food, how generous they were. Mexico Missions did send some food down as well, but prior to our food arriving, they were just taking such good care of us and so giving with the little that they have. And just a huge example in that respect. Gallons and gallons of fresh papaya juice that they made for us. I mean, just incredible how giving and how appreciative they were that we were there.
I forgot about the fresh fruit, you're right. The papaya. Oh, the papaya.
Pineapple juice.
Pineapple
guava.
juice.
Oh my goodness.
Guava.
Guava.
Oh, man,
guava.
that was
That's
amazing.
Pastor Bob's favorite, guava.
Yeah, it was my favorite.
and the mangoes that were just fantastic. Here's one of the stores that were right across the street from the compound. They call, they would open up in the morning. This is in the morning where they bring out some meat, some people, and they share it with the folks there. And then after that's done, then they would open up and they had soft drinks and stuff like that. But I did not see any kind of supermarkets there. I don't know if they don't exist, but I never saw one. And we walked all over different areas of Hogwen while we were there.
I did talk to, so part of when we did the medical work, I got to talk to several of the physicians in the area, and they do have two kind of different systems that run in Cuba. One is kind of what you were allotted on a monthly basis from the state, and then one of them is what you can purchase, the stores that you can purchase are usually run on foreign currency. The issue with those stores, they are there, but they are even more expensive than they are in the U.S. So a physician will make $45 a month, and a t-shirt will be $30. Same with soap being available, but if you're paying $8 for a bottle of Dawn dish soap and you make $45 a month, is soap really available?
I took a picture of this mostly because just to show that the idea of the revolution is still very prevalent within the Cuban community. This is Chi, is that pronounced that right?
I guess, I don't know.
Chi, and it's very prevalent. They have these placards that talk about it and stuff.
You should hear the other side. So, communism is a different philosophy than democracy. So it's kind of interesting because Che went over to Venezuela to teach and try and activate communistic teachings over there and get a communist program going there. And it was the CIA that hired an assassin to kill him. That's our country. That's our democracy. So it's kind of fascinating that we a lot of times look at communists and say, oh, you guys are just bad. But honestly, if we look in the mirror, we kind of do a lot of things ourselves that is way off the beaten path of what's right and what's good. So it's kind of fascinating what we do overseas.
Here's some stuff that Rujan touched on just a little bit. As I was talking to people there, average doctor's income is about $50 a month. Average teacher's income is about $35 a month. Average income overall was about 2,000 pesos. Now, when I was talking to folks about the pesos, a peso, when I took 20 American dollars and traded in for the Cuban pesos, they gave me 3,460 pesos for $20. And I looked at it, their average income is about between $15 and $20 a month from what I could tell. The exchange rate, the cost for a t-shirt, as I'm talking to some of the people, a t-shirt costs about 2,000 pesos, a pair of shoes to about 10,000 pesos, and the cost of an egg about 50 cents. So, we complain, if you can imagine. I should ask these folks, they were there. Am I correct in what I'm writing, what I have here?
Todo está real, solo el dólar que ha subido un poquitico más. El peso cubano ha devaluado mucho más antes de ahora, en vez de 170, está de 180 a 185 pesos por un dólar. Todo lo demás está bien. ¿Cuánto que el dólar?
These folks that are talking up front, they just they were from Cuba, and so they've been there, they experienced it
Okay.
firsthand.
So for the most part, they're all pretty accurate, but it sounds like the exchange rate has raised a bit. So it's more probably like 180, I assume.
So it's gotten a little worse even.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
okay.
sounds. Yeah.
Right. So you can imagine, this is the higher income, some of the areas, and so actually it's worse now than it was before. This is a list of the rations that they're given. And for an example, they are given rations monthly, some of it. About 5 pounds of rice, 30 grams of beans, less than 4 pounds of sugar, 8 ounces of oil, a kilo of salt every 3 months, a tube of toothpaste if they have it, 16 ounces of chicken annually if they have it, and 5 eggs per person. And I was, one of the questions that we were asking the folks that were there, about the eggs mostly, it's like, so you get a few extra chickens, and you get some extra chickens, can you share you have extra eggs, right? And they go, no, because you have too many, then the Cuban government will step in and say, no, we have to share these with other people. So there's no incentive to become more, what do you call it, innovative to do stuff. So. And this is a list that Tammy took, and she shared it with us. Of course, they got the fruits and the veggies that you have. And I think I love fresh vegetables anyhow, so it was very good. But they have to purchase these vegetables. This is just the rations.
Yeah, a
If
lot
you
of
want to
that's-
challenge yourself a little bit, measure out 2 kilos of rice and measure out the 30 grams of beans. That's a handful. And take those 5 eggs and take the kilo of salt for 3 months, and let's see if we can maybe challenge ourselves and live on that. I tried it, and let me tell you, it is. I only made it, I think, 2 days.
So when
Said
we're
I'm
talking
done.
about the food, you were talking with some of the locals about the mental health institute there or whatever. They have a hospital there, and what happens there.
So I have 2 really amazing stories with us. One of them is when we had the medical clinic, there was a lady who came in whose son had some mental health concerns, and he was just too large for her to handle at home, and so she took him to the Mental Health Institute. And the concern is that just in this last short time, it hasn't always been like that, the food is scarce enough that if you're not willing to eat, then they give that food to other people. And so she was really concerned because she heard that 16 people had died in that hospital where her son was, just because, they had taken the food to people that want to eat and those that didn't want to be force-fed, died. So she was, of course, Mama's heart was very concerned. And is it okay if I share my other?
Yep, go ahead.
So we met this really nice pastor couple. They are missionaries. They're Cuban missionaries to Cuba. And they work with, I didn't catch the name of the organization they work with, but it's similar to ASI. And they earn about $17 a month. And they have been working for about a year in the area where they're at. And they were church planting, so the first anything Christian in that area. And within a year, they had 30 people meeting regularly for church. On the kind of lean-to on their house that used to be a chicken coop that they had scrubbed very nice and clean and became a beautiful church. The couple, however, had 2 kiddos, and you'll see a picture of them later. And they were having symptoms of what I would consider a kid having that has autism. They were kind of doing the rocking and didn't make eye contact and didn't come when called. And it wasn't that they were being mean, that they didn't, it's just like it didn't penetrate their brain. And I thought, man, this would be really rough to be a missionary couple in a country where there's not necessarily extra resources. How do you raise 2 kiddos with autism? They were one of the couples that we took food to. And 2 days later, we went and visited them again, because that was one of the churches that we were building for those 30 people. And the kids were laughing and talking and interacting normally. They had just been so malnourished and hungry that there wasn't anything in there for a little bit. And so that day, our food didn't come around lunchtime, and the mom of the house was getting a little anxious, trying to figure out how she's going to be able to feed us. And in my mind, I'm like, we'll just eat the food that, we gave you, and then we'll get you some more tomorrow. And so I asked, where's that food? And with tears in his eyes, the dad said, I couldn't watch my neighbor's kids die while mine ate. And so, of course, that just hits your heart really hard. And we brought them extra food. And again, he said, I'm sorry, I have to share this. I can't just keep it for myself. And then the rest of the Cubans that were working with us came and opened their hearts, and they said, it doesn't happen a lot, and it doesn't happen in the cities, but a lot of times kind of out in the country, a lot of parents have to decide, do I eat today, or do my kids eat today? Because it's not both. And the parents have to decide, how many days do you go hungry before you have to eat to be able to go to work, and you're looking at your kids not eating that day. And so that just, of course, broke my heart that even though they're going through that, their willingness to share with their neighbors and to kind of share the gospel along with the food that they received was just a huge blessing.
Amen.
And that Sabbath, she
Go ahead.
cooked lunch for the speaker of that church, and she had a green pepper in the fridge, and you open the fridge door, and there's 1 green pepper. And just the smile on her face of being able to find that green pepper and to be able to use it to flavor the food to share with the speaker that Sabbath was just such a blessing.
Awesome. I think, how many pounds did we send over of food? We sent over like 5 different types of things, right? Beans, rice, and oats. And
They had beans, rice, oatmeal. Beans, rice, oatmeal. I just had it too.
We were able to give
pasta? Did we do pasta?
all the pastors
Yeah,
in the
pasta.
conference got 8 pounds of beans, 12 pounds of rice. I believe it was 2 pounds of dehydrated potatoes. I think it was a pound of oatmeal and several boxes of pasta. So it was a blessing to be able to. We took 800 pounds of food, I believe, and was able to share it with the community there.
Not near enough. That's what we discovered.
Yeah, it doesn't go far, folks. So what Tammy, one of our auditors, this is the list of the needs that she had written, and it's just a very minor list of what they had and what they need. And some of the things we take for granted. I'm talking to my interpreter, Miguel was his name, and Miguel was like, he goes, I said, what are the things that you need? He goes, well, we don't have a lot of what you would consider as Americans basic: deodorant, bar soap, things like that. We don't have those type of things. And I said, well, so you don't use it or what? He goes, well, you can get it, but you got to go on the black market, which is a term that they use frequently there. And some of the things that we just take for example on our list, underwear. Underwear. There's a shortage or they can't get them. Socks. Shoes.
So just about the underwear, Tammy, she's a social worker, but she thought, I'm going to just take some cute little underwear for the girls over there. So she did, and then the boys came back to her and said, we would even be willing to wear girls' underwear. And that, guys aren't usually that oriented, but they didn't have any. So, they would like to have some underwear. They don't care what gender underwear it is. They would just love to have some. So that's on our list. And that's one of the lists that we're circulating among our churches and saying we're collecting that. Rich Sutton's going to be up here for camp meeting, and he can take it back down with them to Tennessee where we're going to have a shipping container. We're going to load that up with all of our other supplies and ship it over to Cuba in end of October. But these are some of the things that they need and then some of the things that we're providing.
Also things like Tylenol, that we just take for granted. You probably have Tylenol in your medicine cabinet, I'm guessing. Aspirin, things that we don't, these are things that are just not available to them. Again, as we go back to what we're there for building, I thought was interesting. These are some of the street signs, the one-way street signs you see quite often, the stop sign that's there. But the Cuban people, folks, and this is amazing, the Cuban people love to sing. They love their music. And when they sing, they don't sing like Americans. They don't go, they sing. They go. And I had I love this. If you can, I'm going to play this for you, and you can hear them sing, folks.
Are you guys able to provide sound for the video?
One of our pastors, while we were there, Pastor Ricky, he says, you go to Cuba, and he says you go and you listen to him sing for an hour and a half, and then you get to preach for half an hour because they just love their music. And it was so good hearing. We would wake up in our dorm every morning, I would say every morning, and we'd hear them singing in the hallways, and these guys, and it's just like waking up to listening to Pavarotti singing in the hallways. They would just be singing these songs, and it just sounded so good. Wake up in the morning, you hear these guys singing. They're so inspired, so looking forward to doing the Lord's work.
5 o'clock in the mornings when they start doing their singing.
Yeah.
So kind of early, wakes you up. So.
Yeah, you're right. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, and we get up, we do our lesson study and work, a little personal worship, and then you listen to the Cuban people singing. It was just such a blessing. Again, this is Holguin. We're at what they call the Cross. It's a very large city.
Million population, give or take. 1 million population.
A million population, give or take a little bit. This is why I kept wondering, where's the cross? And then, so there's the cross. It's on top of a hill. This is Pastor Benson looking down and taking pictures of it while we're there. Here's another picture. You can see the flowers. So part of Cuba is very, very beautiful. They have because of the temperature and the warmth, they have a lot of different types of flowers. This is the steps we walked down. I walked all the way to the bottom, all the way back down, and walked part of the way with Pastor Benson. He took the liberty of counting how many steps, 448 steps, all the way to the bottom to the top.
A lot of work.
It was,
the way they fed us, we needed the exercise, trust me. So.
Amen.
Okay, this is the team. I'll go from left to right. Leonardo in the back. The two kids that are standing there with their arms around each other, these are the kids that are the attorney. The attorney is the guy with us looking at his phone. The attorney I thought was really interesting. At first I thought of him as like a used car salesman, but I got a completely different thought on him. He was a gentleman. He would make sure that we had the permits, make sure that we had everything in order, and he was at the site many times carrying blocks and cement with us. And he's out there and he's telling Rich, build the churches. I'll get you the permit, build the churches. He keep on, and the conference president's like, hold on, slow down a little bit, slow down a little bit. We're getting too far ahead of it. He goes, no, build the churches. His enthusiasm was just so catchy.
But was it churches that we were building?
Oh, excuse me. I apologize. We built buildings. We built garages that they use for churches. All right. The next two folks are Scott and Tammy. You see the little person peeking over the shoulder there? That's our own Rujan here. Rich and Pam Sutton, Will, Jonathan Kneeling, Adam, Pastor Bob, Diosado. Diosado is a gentleman that you'll see more pictures of him here shortly. He's probably the hardest working individual I've ever met in my life. He just work. Then our own Jeremiah, Jeremiah, what a blessing to have worked with you. Thank you. And then Fred. Again, there's just another picture of the same group. There is Enrique in the front on the right-hand side here. And Enrique was an interpreter for us for quite a while, and then Rich told him, you're going to want to stay here for a whole 2 weeks. And he goes, no, I'm just going to take a week off. And at the end, he didn't want to go. And then he did go, but he had a little bit of conflict on the way back.
Yeah, so God was actually blessing us. When Enrique left, then Pastor took over. When Pastor left, then Jonathan took over. And right throughout the trip, we always had somebody to interpret. But that doesn't mean that we don't need interpreters to some of us Spanish-speaking individuals here. We would love to have you guys on a trip. You never know when God needs to use you when another interpreter leaves.
So, Bob?
Yep.
One of the buildings was a garage, and you had to have a different size door. The attorney was dead.
Oh, that was interesting because the person from the city council had come down and looked at it, and he goes, I know what you guys are doing. You're building a church. And he goes, no, this is a garage. And they said, no. He goes, if this is a garage, your door, and they had like a double door like what we have right here. He goes, your double door is not big enough to let a truck in. You got to make it bigger so the trucks can get in here. And you have to get to know Rich. And Rich like, not a problem. So Rich makes the door 2 blocks higher and bigger, and we reinforced it and stuff like that. And what it did, when you go and open up that entrance, and you stand at the front of that entrance, you look at it, and it actually made for a grander entrance into that building. And it's like, and later on, a couple days later, the councilman calls up the lawyer, and it was just so funny, because this is how God works. The councilman calls him up and he goes, I'm going to pull your permit. You're not going to be able to, you're not going to work on your building. He goes, I'm pulling your permit. No, the attorney says, go ahead, pull it. We're done. We're already finished with the building. You can pull my permit. The building's done. And in Cuba, many times it takes years to build a building. Well, you think about it, when we get there and we're working on these buildings with the Cuban people, we're getting a building done about every 3.5 to 4 days. In 16 days, we built 5 buildings, and the Lord blessed us, and it's like, so we're out there working and getting things done, and they're trying to find out ways to stop us, and the Lord was always ahead. He always provided. He always had something, but again, we had to be flexible, right?
One night, the guys, I understood, didn't want to put everything back on the bus and come in the morning just for a small amount that had to be done, and so they asked, can we just stay later today? Because we don't want to do all that extra work of loading all the tools back on and taking it back off. And so we're like, yeah, okay, we're going to work late into the evening. Well, the next day, one of the inspectors showed up and pulled the permit for another garage. But because we didn't want to do, or the guys didn't want to do the extra work, the garage was done already. And so, again, just one of those blessings.
Here's one, and if you can, I can, can't I? Bear with me, folks. I'm not really good at this. You see this gentleman bending over right here? Look at his feet.
Shirt.
In the yellow shirt. I'm the short, fat one in the purple shirt, right? This gentleman, he's a pastor, and he went up there and he was mixing mud. He had to come in, he had his dress pants on, his shoes, stuff like that. He starts mixing mud, splashes a little bit on his shoes, takes off his shoes and socks, puts them aside, cuffs up his pants, and starts barefooted mixing concrete. And see those stones there? That's a crushed, like equivalent to crushed concrete or limestone. Barefooted, I watched this man load up cement buckets, half full of cement, walk across those stones, walk through cactus, through grass, you know. And the people, some of the other pastors came there and said, "Pastor, you don't have any shoes on." And he said, "The Lord didn't have shoes either." And if you've ever worked around concrete, it's very drying, and stuff like that. And they had a priority. Their priority is doing something for God. God is first, and they're willing to make those kind of sacrifices. They didn't. Go ahead.
There's a story behind that. There's a reason why he had to do that. The story is that we had hired this company, this one person. He had the what they call a mixer, cement mixer, and he had about 10 guys. And so we hired them to help us. And so we were going to pay them, I think it was $20 or $25 for 12, 13, 14 days of construction. And so anyway, that was agreed because that's a little bit more than the average rate for the month. So it was a good deal. But after a few days, they said, "You know what, we're not willing to work for that anymore. We want $25 a day." And so if you know Rich Sutton, he's not going to be pressured in anything, and he does things very economically. He said, "All right," he says, you guys are done. We don't need you." And so that means they took the mixer, and they took the guys that were working with us, and it was just a small group of 13, 14, 15 people. And so now we're having to mix the cement by hand, like these guys are. No nice mixer to just throw stuff in there and watch it mix, and just take it, and none of that. It's hard labor. And so we're out there busting our buns, trying to flip that stuff and all that. And so I'm a little bit older, and he looked at us and he said, "You know what?" He had his dress shoes on. He came because he expected to see all this team working together. And when he heard the story, those guys were gone. It's like, "You know what? I'm not going to let these guys do them by themselves. I'm taking off my shoes and socks." Well, first he had his shoes on, then he got cement on. I was like, "Oh, that's not going to work. I better roll up my slacks that I wear to preach in, and I better get in there and help them out." So that's the kind of, we're going to jump in and help when, there's help needed. And so he was a great inspiration to us.
How many building supplies did you get down there, and how many did you have to have shipped down?
All of our building supplies was shipped in, except blocks.
Blocks.
With the exception
I think
of
we
blocks.
bought cement down there too, the cement.
But all the sheathing we put on the roof, all the metal, all that stuff was brought in except for the cement blocks.
We had equipment that they've never seen in their life. I mean, I'm serious. We had all the tools and all that stuff, and they're looking at that like, wow. If we had to build with what they had, it would have taken a while, would have been a lot less precise. So we'll talk about building blocks in a little bit later. But when we came in, when we finally got all of our stuff cleared through entry into the country, as it came in, it's like, wow, that's amazing. They were really appreciative of what we had.
If I can interject too, I don't know if this is a good time to, but when we didn't have the equipment, when the shipping container wasn't there yet, or some of the building sites, we just didn't have equipment. So Pastor Ritchie would go into the community and just ask, do you have a shovel? Do you have a barrel? Do you have a wheelbarrow? Do you have, what do you have? And the people just freely gave, whatever they had. We had shovels that were wired together, but it worked well, and the churches got built. And one of the blessings that we heard later is those people that donated those things for us to use freely, having no connection to these garages, would come later and worship in the garages, saying, "This is my church, because my shovel was used to build it, or that my wheelbarrow was used to build it." And that connection that we thought was an inconvenience actually ended up drawing people in.
And this is the, oops, I messed that all up, guys. Bear with me for just a moment. This is the pastor. He's the pastor of the church we're building. We call it the First Church. This is Rich. Rich, as an individual, really pretty unique in the sense that he does everything that needs to be done. He grabs a trowel, he'll mix mud, he will cut blocks, he'll do whatever. He has whatever he sees need done, he's not above doing it. He's not the guy that stands back and points to do work. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty. If you shook hands with him, you would know that because his hands are pretty heavily calloused. Here's the front of the church. As you can see, this is how we block them in. You can see the supports, and this is the first church. It was sort of interesting because on the windows there is supports. We have to put boards across the supports. But we got ready to do that, and we didn't have boards. And in Cuba, lumber is a premium. It's something that's cherished. You know, you almost have to have a meeting before you cut a board. And so I said, Rich, we don't have boards. Rich turns to Pastor Richie, and he says, let's go ask the neighbors and see if they got any boards. And sure enough, he says, he gave us the lumber. He says, cut them, do whatever you got to do so we can build our church. And so the boards that you see are supported. You see the blocks that are vertical up and down. Those are supporting some boards that were given us by the Cuban people. On top of that, we put a bond beam all the way around. We put re-rod, fill it up with concrete. So it gives it strength, and then we got to let it set overnight, and then we can pull the boards out. But the boards were given to us. Again, that was another case where we kept asking. We'd ask them for something. Oh, yeah, we have that. And it was just a God's blessing us over and over and over again. This is, again, the same building off the one side, the front. This is the old church on the left here. This is the old church that they worshiped in. And this is the new church that we have. The cistern, I call it a cistern. I'm not sure if that's a proper name for it. It's just held water for us to mix for the blocks. That will be taken out of there. And this is what we have for them when we get done.
That's the roughed-in version. They'll go ahead and stucco it and paint it and make it beautiful. Yeah. But that's after we're gone.
Yeah, thank you. That's right. It's roughed in, folks, and they do a really good job at the stuccoing and things like that. Again, this is the old church and the new church next to each other. You walk in through the front door of the old church. There's a room to the left, a little room to the right, and then the restroom right straight ahead. I took this picture. It was sort of interesting. When it was at night, we're cleaning up all the tools. We're getting everything cleaned up. You can see the sun is starting to set a little bit. In fact, there it is, starting to set. And as the sun's starting to set, all of a sudden the people from the community started coming by. And we're like, what's going on here, you know? And these folks start coming in, and they start walking into their church, and they're looking at, and I keep calling it a church, I don't mean to do that. But they come into the building, and pretty soon there's, I'm guessing 20, maybe 30 people in there. And they wanted to look at their place of worship. And it was really pretty neat because it's getting evening, the sun is starting to set, and we got together, and we started praying together, and we started singing some songs together. And it's like, what a blessing. What a way to end the day with that blessing.
We were just finished that church. We were done. We were moving on to other churches, so we were through with the community, and they came out to just appreciate it and celebrate with us what God helped us to do. So it was an awesome time. Here, as Rujan said a minute ago, sometimes we wanted to finish a job. This is us. That little light you see in the background, that's the moon. It was pretty late, and we were out late. We were trying to get things done. We wanted to finish up just some things. In this case, we wanted to finish the walls, get them up, so we could start putting the roof on the next morning. This is the group of us working. This is the third church.
Yeah, and this is you see that yellow house? There's a tiny little piece that sticks off the yellow house into, like, above the new church that we built, and that was the chicken coop addition. That was their church previously. It was about 10 feet by 5 feet, 6 feet. What do you guys think? I don't know. Trying to cram 30 people into that, I don't want to know, in the hot, humid air, but they were very happy to worship together.
This is Fidel. They also called him Flaco. And I'm going to introduce some of the team members here. This is Adam. He was one of the block leaders. He also was one of our welders. Jonathan, he says over here, is a little bit shy. He is the block layer, and Jonathan is multi-talented. I'm not saying it because he's here, but Jonathan, first he was a block layer, but I also saw him pick up a shovel. He would mix mud. He would do whatever was necessary. But he's also a very good interpreter for us. He has a unique ability, and I'm studying Spanish, but I can't do what he will do, and I never will be able to. But as we're doing worship, we had some of the Cuban people with us in our worship service, and Jonathan was able to hear what Rich was saying during our worship service and interpret it and say and speak to the Cuban people in Spanish about what Rich was saying. And I thought, what a blessing, you know. And Jonathan, you're very much appreciated. I want you to know that. It was just such a blessing, and many times and it's sort of funny because some of the folks would say something to us, and I'd say, what? You know, and then rather than say it slower, they would say it louder, and it's like, it didn't help, you know. and I'd say, finally I turned to Jonathan, I'd say, Jonathan, what's he saying? And then Jonathan was there, and he'd interpret it for me. Again, this is Jonathan, and Manny is handing him up buckets of concrete. You know, you can see behind him there's a board laying across. He's laying blocks on that. Once he lays the blocks across there, then we have to fill that hole. We have a whole trench that we fill in with concrete to bond the whole building together. This is the first interpreter, what's his name? Enrique, right?
Enrique, Kike.
Enrique, with talking to Rich. He was our first interpreter, one of our first interpreters. This is me. I'm not sure what I'm pointing at. My nickname when I was in Cuba, they gave me a nickname. I was called Dusty. You know, and you can see why. I did a lot of the cutting for a lot of the blocks while I was there. I had hearing protection, but no, I didn't have a respirator or a dust mask. If you wear a dust mask and it's 95 degrees and you're trying to wear a dust mask, after a while I thought, well, I'll live with the dust. All right. This is Fred and Rich.
The conference president also came and cut blocks for us a lot of days, so that was just amazing to see that everybody jumped in to get them done. The church is built.
I thought this was an interesting, very good. You see the guy on the left there, his name is Oscar. I'm not sure if I have a good picture of Oscar or not, but Oscar became our interpreter later. He's Cuban, but he taught himself how to speak English. He started watching different programs because they opened up the internet, watched different programs, started reading, writing in English, and he taught himself how to speak English. I thought that was pretty amazing. But this is Rich. One of the things I learned about Rich, his idea of speaking Spanish is he'll say a word and put O on the end of it. So it'd be rodo, cemento, trucko, whatever, and he's thinking he's tired. And it was really sort of funny but I found through working with him this time, he does understand Spanish, he just can't speak, he doesn't speak it, he can't roll his tongue and stuff like that, like the standards. So, again, this is evidence of Jonathan mixing mud, you know, and it was really neat watching the young guys as opposed to the old guys mixing mud, because these guys would go through with the shovels and they're just flipping this mud. And the pastor saw Diosalo. Not only was Diosalo mixing the mud, but he was jumping up in the air as he was doing it. And
when I was mixing mud, I used, when I got tired, I leveraged on my knee. I got the thing down here, and like that, because I'll tell you what, it takes a lot of physical strength. But then when Diosdados was jumping as he's flipping that stuff, it's like, that's a whole other level of great physical shape.
Rich. This is Fred. As you can see, they would bring our food to the site, and it got to the point after several meals, and I'll tell you the truth, guys, I love to eat. And after a while, I was like, guys, you got to cut it down. There's just too much. It was just, just a little bit, and I didn't want to sound unappreciative because they're very generous. The Cuban people are very generous with everything they have. And it's just like, you just got to cut it down just a lot. I'd be the only Cuban missionary to come back heavier than I was when I was there when I come back. This is Pastor Ricky. I referred to Pastor Ricky as the radar. You see MASH years ago. Radar was always getting supplies. You asked this gentleman to get him anything. And I'll tell a little story. Is that okay? I'm going to tell a little story here. Pastor Ricky, first we had gloves, and we'll show you our gloves here later. And I see that the Cuban people are not wearing gloves, and so I asked him if we could find a place where he could get some gloves, so he could get some gloves. So he did, and like within a day, and I'm not sure how he did it. You know, he wasn't from Cuba. He actually lives in San Antonio. He's a minister in San Antonio. But he'd had connections and go outside and he'd find where to get whatever we needed, whether it be a shovel or gloves or whatever. Well, one of the things I noticed on some of the people who were working for us, the concrete, the ends of their toes of their shoes, their work shoes, were wore through. And so I asked Pastor Ricky to go see if we can find them some work shoes. And there's several of us, and we didn't even know it together. There's several of us looking to see about getting work shoes for the Cuban people. So after we're talking to them, and we're asking, Pastor Ricky come up to me and he says, the Cuban people would like to talk to you, the Cuban workers. I said, okay. So we go out there, and there's a bunch of us out there, and the Cuban people said, we think our work shoes are good enough to work on. We were wondering if you would mind buying us shoes for church. And it's like, wow, that hit the heart. They wanted us to buy shoes for church. And it's like, absolutely, not a problem, you know. And it's like, you know, to me, I think that puts their priorities correctly.
Amen.
Oh, he's showing me how much time I have. There are a lot of dogs there. Ricky laying walls, Jonathan, Dusty, Diosalo, and some of the Cuban in the background. Pastor Bob there. He put you see the scarf hanging on his head? They would wet those and put them over their heads, and it would be so hot there that helped keep them cool.
So Diosdado there in the last photo in the black sweatshirt, he lives over by Havana, and excuse me. So Mexico Missions and Beyond went to Havana last fall, September, October-ish, and he was able to work along with the guys from Mexico Missions and help build buildings there as well. And prior to that, he never knew that Americans would care, that Americans cared anything about the Cuban people. And it made such a difference in his heart just seeing that Americans would sacrifice their time and go there to help them. And so many things are done with a trip like this, whether it's, you know, preaching the gospel, absolutely we want to do that. But in that particular, you know, man's life, it totally changed his outlook on you and me, you know, just by having people from here willing to go and help them out.
And knowing that God has a family all across the world that cares for each other was very impressive to him.
This is Will, Jeremiah, Fred, Pastor Bob, Flacco, and these are the team. These are the guys that we're building is what I'm introducing you to. This is Diosalo with a bag of concrete. Diosalo, I'm guessing, probably weighed 150, maybe 160 pounds. These bags of concrete would weigh about between 180 and 100 to 200 pounds, 190 pounds. And these guys were carrying them, loading them up on their back, carrying them. It's like, no, we'll put it in a wheelbarrow. You can see the wheelbarrow there. And they didn't need the wheelbarrow. They carried them. Very strong, very impressive.
Yeah, they're not on normal concrete bags. They would take like feed bags and fill them with concrete because that's what was available. So try and lift a feed bag of concrete.
Wow.
This is myself and Rich trying to fix the blade on the cutoff saw, or the cut saw that we have. And the pastor had the great insight of bringing Leatherman tools.
Leatherman, let's hear it for Leatherman.
Leatherman tools.
Came in very handy.
Yeah, I'm trying to use 2 nails to take the screw off so I can change the blade on the saw. And then I found out that the pastor had Leathermans, and that made a difference. There's Fred, Pastor Richie. This is Leonardo. He worked in the military. He was in the military for 25 years, retired from the military, and he has dedicated his life, the rest of his life, living within his salary, his pension from the Cuban government, and he's has dedicated his life to doing missionary work. This is us building. This is Scott, Manny, and Oscar. They're building trusses for the churches. Will is not praying. He's drilling holes in the rafters. You know, you see him, he's pushing really hard on that drill. The metal, some of that material was very strong. Here's what the rafters look like when before we put them up. We just lay them out. At the one end, you can see, actually, it's Adam and Jeremiah on the end. They're holding the first truss up. They weld it to the outside of the wall. Once they weld it up, then they start flipping them up. And it's amazing. These guys, this team of roofers, I watched them. They built a roof over it was 52 by about 26-foot building. They put the roof on in about 2 hours. It was impressive. These guys did some amazing work. And the Lord was blessing them. Again, that's Adam. Pretty intense. There's Adam again. There's Jeremiah. Jeremiah, he liked his pictures taken. This is those guys where, they are. See that? They got the screw ends. This is them for like 2 hours. Bending over, putting the screws in, one after another. We just leaning the sheets up there, and they're grabbing the sheets, they're pulling them up, and lay them out and screwing them on just as fast as they can. You can notice the trusses, you might be a little concerned with them bending. There's no snow load down there, so they don't have to worry about any kind of snow, so it's just basically rain. They're screwed together, so it holds them up for any kind of hurricanes or anything like that. They do very well. Again, Jeremiah. I took a picture of actually it wasn't myself. This was one of Reuben's pictures. We saw the chickens, and this chicken had like 6 chicks with her, and she's just wandering around cleaning up everything. It was pretty, I thought it was pretty impressive as one of the churches that we had. Your turn.
So I got to meet several physicians while we were there, a radiologist and a primary care doc and a nephrologist, and who knows, they have amazing health care over there. One of the concerns is supplies, though. They have the people to do the work, but they don't necessarily have supplies. I was talking to one of the docs that said, for instance, if you have to have your gallbladder out here in the U.S., which I do, help with a lot, you just go to the hospital, they do the CT scan, gallbladder has to come out, you go and get it out. Well, there, they tell you your gallbladder has to come out. Here are the sutures you got to find on the black market. Here's the scalpel you got to find on the black market. Here's the dressings you got to find on the black market, and bring them when you're ready for surgery. They give you a list of what you need to bring, because what happens, at least in that province, is the hospital will have supplies given to them, but to be able to function and survive, they will frequently sell those supplies on the black market, and then you have to go and buy your supplies back again to be able to go have your surgery. And you can imagine, when you know nothing about stitches, if I tell you go find a 2-0 Vicryl on a SH needle, where are you going to go find that out here in the community? So yeah, the physicians are amazing. But they unfortunately just don't have supplies frequently. And so they were very blessed when Pastor Benson kind of organized the medical clinic, and we could bring blood pressure cuffs and glucose monitors and things that people, they don't know if they're diabetic because they've never had their blood sugar tested. You don't know if you have high blood pressure because you've never met a blood pressure cuff in your life. But the people there have been amazingly blessed with the simple diet of rice and beans. It has actually kept a lot of our Cuban brothers and sisters very healthy. Yep.
That's right.
This is Tammy. She's the one who made the list. She was one of 2 women when I was in Cuba. I asked them, please don't carry the blacks. It's not doing it. And she said, don't tell me what to do. Mm-hmm. The other person who told me that is standing beside me. It's like, don't tell me what to do, I'll do it. And I listened.
In my defense, they wouldn't let me lift a block. If you touch a block, there's like 5 people there to take it from you, which was nice, but at the same time, you kind of feel like you can't do anything to help with the mission trip. And finally, I convinced some of the guys to let me work. And so if any of you ladies want to go on a mission trip, I think I have them trained to let us do some things.
So we just anti-stress massage was part of it. It was great to serve the Cuban people going through there. Just like she said, the supplies that we brought for checking blood glucose and all that, the doctors were really excited about that. It's just like they had tools now to work with. They knew what to do, but they just didn't have those tools before we got there to do that kind of stuff for the community. So it was a real blessing to be able to provide something that enabled them to be a blessing to the community.
Yeah, the community was like 2 blocks down the street waiting for the medical clinics to start. And it was even some of our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ that just, glasses. We were able to provide reading glasses that churches in the area donated. And all of those supplies were just such a big blessing.
Again, Pastor Bob was thrown in front of the bus. He was supposed to only do, I think, 5 days of sermons.
Yep.
And on top of building the church and stuff like that, doing the health stuff, he was also doing evangelistic work.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, Richie, he did like 5 or 6 days. He's Spanish speaking. He's from Mexico, so he speaks the lingua, and that was great. And then, so after he went back to the United States to resume his pastoral responsibilities, and they gave me 6 nights to present, and I had to work through a translator. And so he's a young translator, and it was pretty amazing because when we were wrapping up that last night, one of the ladies, they've been praying that people will be responding to God's word. And so the last night they said, Pastor, you need to make some appeals tonight. Not that we didn't before, but you need to have them stand and come forward because we really want to disciple people. So I made some appeals, and there was like 25, 30, 35 that came forward. And all of a sudden my interpreter just kind of stood back, and he just took it all and he goes, wow, look at all that. And he was amazed. I think it was for him, it was like that he could see that his skills and talents were counting for something seriously amazing. That because he was translating, he was a part of the blessing that brought people to Jesus and to have them put their faith in him. And he was just beginning to realize what a blessing it was to be in service for God.
Again, this is Pastor Richie. What a speaker. He did a fantastic job sitting there. This is the church, the main church that we have in Hogwen. They're just starting. This place will be packed by the time they start doing the meeting. It's about 300 people, but if you look off on the far side, you'll see people looking in through the windows once it gets filled up. The Cuban people are actually really looking forward to hearing the word. This is myself. This is my interpreter, Miguel. The lady that's to my left, on the right here, her grandmother preached the word and spread the word throughout the community, and they asked me to go in after we did a sermon at church and pray with her mom. Pastor Richie. This is everything is in Cuba. They have a beautiful, beautiful beach that we spent the day on. It's not all we did, but only one day we spent at the beach, and we really enjoyed it. Yeah, pretty nice, wasn't it?
Sweet.
There we are out there. This is Junior that you're talking about.
No, so this is the driver of the conference car, and like I said, within 5 minutes he was gently sussing out, do you love Jesus or can I share him with you? And he has to do it carefully because you never know who you're driving in your vehicle. So it was just their faith in stepping out. Same with the attorney. Whenever that bus door opened, no matter what community we were in, he came out with steps to Christ. He came out with different literature or invitations to the meetings being held at the church or something. That they're just stepping out in faith, even though it can come back negatively on them and make their life very difficult. They're just getting out there and sharing.
This is Manny. The thing about Manny I really got impressed with was Manny, he's a very quiet man, very strong. But he's the type of guy that when he said something, everybody listened. He goes, you're not mixing the concrete right, and then he'll show you how to mix it right, and he wants to make sure he does a good job. And we have another picture of him that you can see his strength in his arms and stuff. Very, very nice. This is his son-in-law, again, Fernando. They also call him Flaco. This is Fred.
So one of the things, when we took our day off, we said, hey, we want you guys to come with us, They work so hard serving us and working with us. And we said, we want to make sure you guys come. And so when we bought pizza, we bought enough for them because we wanted them to be with us. Some of them had to come later in the day because they had other responsibilities. But, it's just when we went into town, we got a pizza. We invited them to, and we covered it. Just wanted to be together because there is so much a part of our lives. They blessed us so much in how they fed us, took care of us, transported us, and looked out for us that it was just great just being able to have some downtime and being a family. It was an awesome experience.
Rich. This is, I didn't think I didn't recall him. This is Oscar. He's the guy I told you about that he taught himself how to speak Spanish. This is Diaz.
He also got a hold of a Bible and started reading about Christianity and about Jesus. And not only is he a newly baptized Christian, but he brought in his mom and dad and whole family. So they're brand new to the church.
Amen. What a
And
blessing.
he's already working.
This is Diaz-Salo. I think you know who this is, right? This is this is Jonathan and Jeremiah on the motorcycle. This is actually the pastor who's driving this motorcycle here. Let me go one more. And I thought it was sort of interesting because he had when the communism came over, he was a successful businessman. And after the communists came in, he built was it 5 or 6 churches?
So when you go on vacation in Cuba, you have to kind of ask for permission to go on vacation. And he asks for permission in his week vacation a year. Him and his nephew, I believe it is, goes and rehabilitates churches. So if there's a church that's falling apart, they fix it and clean it up and get the community excited again about it. But yeah, I think 5 churches or so, 1 week a year at a time, and that's your only week of vacation. They've been, so pastor full-time and church builder on his week off.
This is a good road in Cuba. Folks, there's not a lot of good roads in Cuba. It's sort of funny. It's they said, they asked me, was like, do you have some bad roads in the U.S.? I said, we have some. He goes, we have some good roads in Cuba. So I thought it was funny. This is how we mix the mud again with Diaz-Salo. I'm carrying mud. This is Manny. He's laying blocks. This is him laying the block. As you can look at these blocks, they're not, what's the word I'm looking?
They're not symmetrical.
Thank you.
They're taller on one end than they are on the other. So that caused perpetual problems. We thought, well, we'll get all the short ones together, but they weren't all short. They kind of had so it makes it harder to lay blocks in a straight line with not like the precise way that we like to do things.
So one of the blessings that have been provided with, since we've come back from Cuba, is we have sent, or Mexico Missions and Beyond has sent a block maker, and we're hoping to employ some of the gentlemen that we met to be starting to make blocks now for later in the year, so that we don't run into the issue of not having blocks to build, because we actually had to borrow blocks from a conference building project that weren't the right size blocks, but we kind of made it work. So it'll be an amazing blessing, not only in the guy's life that will be making the blocks, that were super hard workers with us, but we'll also hopefully have the blocks available to be able to build as many or more churches, garages. We tease like that because, here we can say church, but trying to remember to say garage when you're in Cuba.
This is Leonardo and Manny in the background. This is their church. No, they had. In fact, well, you see here, you see the pink around the doorway. You can see it on the edge here, and then also this is the church. They had about 50 members in their church. As we went there, they would.
Go this one here real quick. What I loved was that machine right there in orange. That came to the rescue. We were mixing it by hand, and it cleared customs or whatever. It's like, hallelujah, Samson is here. It saved a lot of our backs and everything else. So it was cool.
It built character.
Yeah, it definitely builds character.
Yeah. So this is what we built for them after the church. This slide, you can see the back side of the church where they got the corrugated roofing there. It's starting to rust. We built this building, and it is right here. We just have to put the ridge. They're working on putting the ridge cap on the building, and then they will eventually put grading or stucco on the outside of the building, and they'll have their church. This is me at the airport. I said, look at the Liberty Bell. I was with Pastor Bob. We got to spend a night together at the airport. And this is, I said, look at the Liberty Bell. And I thought, well, that'd be pretty good on our slide. This is my gloves after 1 week. 6 days, not even a week. This is 6 days of work. And I thought I wasn't alone. And what we'd do is, as we wore holes in our gloves, we found that you can take duct tape, wrap it around your fingers where the holes are, and then you continue to use the gloves, to protect your hands a little bit, because concrete is very abrasive.
I know it's getting late, so a quick story, though, before we close here. Reuben Purley, the teenager that kind of took a lot of the photos that you saw tonight, one evening were up on, as Lloyd was mentioning, Cross Hill overlooking the town of Holguin, or Holguin rather. And there was a gentleman up there that was asking money from some of us. And I didn't give him anything, and now I feel bad about it after, now realizing the conditions that are there and everything. And as we were up there for a while, next thing you know, Reuben is slipping his shoes off. You saw that a pair of tennis shoes might cost 5 months' wages. And he's slipping his tennis shoes off, and this wonderful Cuban gentleman is putting his feet in Reuben's shoes, and Reuben gave him his shoes and walked away in his socks. Moments like that make going on a trip worth it. To see somebody's life be touched in that little way. We take a pair of shoes for granted. We have closets full of them. To this gentleman, you should have saw how excited he was to have a nice pair of tennis shoes. Something he didn't have and couldn't get, And there's so much like that we take for granted each and every day. Whether it's food, and whether it's freedom to just travel our country without being stopped at, every state border and asked what we're doing and where we're going. There's so many things we take for granted in this country. And going on a mission trip helps put it all into perspective for you. And it is life-altering. After going to a country that is, I'll say, underprivileged or doesn't have the amenities we have, and you come back, your life will never be the same if you allow the Lord to work in that way in your heart. And I just want to say it would be wonderful for you in this room to go on a mission trip, and you never would regret it. If you had the opportunity, take it. It was a desire that I had of wanting to go on a trip, and I never had the opportunity, and the Lord opened the door to go with Mexico Missions. And if you have the opportunity, take it, and you will not regret it. But don't wait until you go on a mission trip to be a missionary. Being a Christian is to be a missionary each and every day, no matter where we go. And did you have something?
A lot of this costs a lot of money, but the ones rich usually don't. How much do they cost to?
Yeah, absolutely. So Cuba was a little bit more expensive than Mexico because of having to apply for religious visas and stuff. So Mexico, for just an individual, was $350, and that covered food and lodging for 2 weeks. And most mission trips are going to be way more than that for a 1-week trip. Cuba, I think, was $500 for the 16 to 18 days we were there.
That's because we're a small group, but when there's a larger group that are going now, it's $375 per person. That includes the visa, a religious visa. But if you have a family of 4 or more, it's $275 per person. The food, lodging, transportation, you can't beat the deal. And the ticket for flying in and out.
Well, yeah, the flight is in addition to that, yes. So you're right, Rich keeps the trips very, very affordable.
Yep, definitely.
But each and every day of our lives, we're called to be a missionary. So if one of you have the opportunity, sign up for a trip. Don't wait till October. Don't wait till December. Don't wait till January to be a missionary. Be a missionary today when you walk out of this room. Be a missionary to your family at home. Be a missionary to your neighbors. When you go to school, be a missionary to those you're around. Be a missionary to those you're working with each and every day. Don't wait until you're in a foreign country to be a missionary. It really puts it into perspective when you're there, because we're all there for that purpose. And we're like, of one mind that we're here doing this thing and we're got a clear vision. But it should be that way each and every day of our lives. So definitely go to another country to be a missionary, and you will love it. And the Lord can use you no matter what your skill level is. But don't wait to be a missionary only in that time. Let's do it each and every day of our lives, because there's people all around us that need to know the good news of Jesus Christ.
Amen. It says in Jeremiah 33:3, it says, "Call me, and I will answer you." And we have to believe the Lord answers prayer. It says, "I will show you great and mighty things which you do not know." Our trip to Cuba, I think, was very good at showing that and reflecting that. I think we all have grown, and we want to share it with you guys. Again, very much, Jeremiah, I couldn't have said that any better. You're right. We have an opportunity to do missionary work right here. Look around you, look in front of you, look behind you, look to your next door neighbors, look to your family, friends, share the gospel with them. Mexico Mission, this is the information from Rich that he has, changing lives through short-term missions. Here are the missionary outreach that he's going to be doing for the rest of this year. Chiapas, June 27th to July 11th of this year. Last I knew, I talked to Rich a week and a half ago. He had 3 laborers lined up for this missionary trip. All 3 of them were 3 girls. 2 girls had laid blocks before. 1 girl had no experience. So he's looking for some help maybe here. Go ahead, please. Sure, right there.
And I want you guys to notice that Sault Ste. Marie was on that next slide. That's our Sault Ste. Marie. So if you want to help to revive and brighten up a church here in Michigan, I know more hands would be appreciated there as well.
That's correct. Sault Ste. Marie on August 6th through the August 19th will be here, right here in Michigan. Again, it's Mexico Missions and Beyond, so it's an outreach there. Also, there's 3 missionary endeavors in Cuba. As of a week and a half ago, these were filled. So you have to call Rich and say, "Hey, Rich, can you squeeze me in?" But last time I talked to him, he says, "There's no room." But
if you feel inspired to help with those two, there is the brick making project, and we took 800 pounds of food this last time, and as the Michiganders, we've kind of taken responsibility of the beans being shipped on this next one, and we're hoping to ship about 2,000 pounds of beans. So if you guys want to be involved with that, just reach out to me, and I can get you in touch with that too.
we're hoping to make a shipment of a shipping container to send to Cuba. Rich has given me some information, and we're working on that. So if you're interested in what they need, of course, food is always needed, but also like clothing, stuffed animals, things like that. We don't think of the whole list that we had shown earlier. We have hopes in getting a shipping container, fill it up. We have to be careful because a lot of the stuff, if you just have it in boxes, it's going to get the mice and whatever will get into it. So we're going to have to put it into plastic containers, make sure they're sealed, things like that. The food we don't want to put onto the shipping container until the last thing, because if it sets too long, of course, it gets stale and stuff like that, and that's not what we want to do.
So before we wrap, I'd like to just hear from you guys. What is the takeaway from all this? Just from Rajan, we'll go down here. I'd love to hear from Jonathan what his takeaway is. And I'd like Jasmine to come up and just tell us a little bit, maybe what it was like in Cuba for her. She come to this country, and then we'll have closing prayer. But
well, as you guys know, my family and I have always been involved in supporting Ruan and Kati as missionaries in Central and South America. And I kind of got into a lull where that's my thing. That's how I'm witnessing, sending money occasionally, checking in on my brother occasionally. And I just really felt impressed, which is why I reached out this time to stop hiding behind that and to actually do something. And the life change that just being passionate again about sharing Jesus. Like you said earlier, Jeremiah, like it hit me at the trip. Like I'm working from 5 in the morning till 9 at night, well, without complaining. And here I am in Michigan and I get home at 5 from work and I'm done. I'm, taking my dog for a walk. And why don't I have that passion for work here? It's the same people that are needing God's forgiveness and hope and joy and love. And it was just, if you can go on the trip, go on a trip, because it's 100% for changing your heart and giving you that inspiration to just go and do, instead of kind of getting in that rut of, this is what I normally do.
For me, it's sort of, I described it earlier about, I call it a fire or a light that's lit up inside me that I don't want to quench. I want to share this with people. It talks in the scriptures about, he says, go and tell your story, and go and tell it. And everyone here has a story they can share. No one can argue about your story, your hardships, the things that you can see where God led you through these trials, these problems. And I'm saying, share it with those folks. Talk to people about it. Put your arms around them. One of the things that I didn't bring up was there's a guy, had a calling up there. There's a man who was very inebriated that came up front. And, he comes up and he's leaning against the piano and he's really, really in pretty rough shape. And then Scott, one of the guys from the U.S., comes up, and Scott's a big man. He walks up behind him, he puts his hand on his shoulders, and he embraces the man. That's our role. You don't embrace the problem, you embrace the person. And we have people who have problems. It's our place as Christians to put our arms around them and hold them and support them and help them go through their trials, not to become part of that problem. So, and that's the difference that this made.
So I think about Jesus on the cross. It was a joy before him of people being saved in his kingdom that made it worthwhile for him. And for me, it's the joy of seeing the smiles on the faces as you're ministering to them. Maybe you're giving food, or you're helping them health-wise, or you're building a church for them to worship in, or you're just spending time with them. That joy is just unbelievable. It fills my little heart right up. So,
just seeing how real these people are. Mm-hmm. It's not just these people in this other country that you see on TV or you hear about. No, they're people like me and you that are living each and every day in whatever conditions they are, and working at the one job site. The gentleman must have loved listening to good Christian music, and so he has the radio going or whatever music device he had, and hearing songs come across there that are the same songs we sing here in America was really touching. The world's a small place. And it's not them there, us here. No, the world's a small place. And they love Jesus there, just like we love Jesus here. Mm-hmm. And there's a closeness in that. With the music thing, I couldn't understand the words. But it's the same words that we sing here. And it was just a touching moment for me. Across seas on an island, and here they're singing the same songs to Jesus that we like to sing to him. And they're real people. Praise the Lord.
Johnny, do you want to say anything? Jasmine, do you want to say anything? Come on up. Come on up. Say something. So this is home. Was home for Jasmine for all her life, except for 8 years, the last 8 years. So.
Tu vida en Cuba. Solo como tu vida en Cuba.
Bueno, eso sería muy largo de explicar.
Be a very long answer.
Pero los cubanos en general pasamos por una crisis bien grande. Es algo que humanamente las personas nunca van a entender, solamente los que lo vivimos, porque no hay de nada. Yo le explicaba a ella que lo peor es la medicina. Las personas se enferman y no tienen medicamento.
She was saying that Cuba's a big place and the people are definitely the heart of it, but there are a lot of struggles, and medicine is a really big part of it. There's not a lot of the resources and everything that we have to help when people are sick.
Tú sabes, comentarles acerca de Cuba sería no todo el tiempo que ellos han tomado para decir lo básico de nuestro país, porque en Cuba pasan muchísimas cosas que nosotros los que vivimos en Cuba ni siquiera lo entendemos.
There's a lot of things that happen that not even they understand there, that things are just bigger than the people themselves even.
Básicamente, la economía en Cuba es un caos. Los valores de los alimentos son exageradamente caros. La medicina no hay. Los niños se enferman y no tienen una pastilla para bajarse la fiebre, que es lo más simple que pueda tener un hospital. En Cuba no existe. Los médicos Cuba es una potencia médica mundial, entre comillas, porque los médicos están y son capaces de hacer lo mejor de ellos para que la población tenga acceso a la medicina, pero la medicina no existe, no está.
So it was a lot of what they were all saying earlier about there's the people to do the medicine work, but they don't have the resources. So there's a lot of people that are not able to get the help they need because they just don't have the medicine. It just is not there. And that's really hard.
Básicamente no sé que ellos si quisieran preguntar algo que quisieran saber con respecto a ahí.
If anyone has any questions they would like to ask, or anything more specific.
I have one that I haven't been able to get answered. Is there any way to mail something to Cuba?
Quería saber si hay una manera en que podemos enviar recursos, mandar.
Mira, yo vengo de la Florida. Mi iglesia eran los peregrinos y ellos, como muchos pastores de ahí son de Cuba, de La Habana principalmente, la mayoría de los que pasan por la iglesia de los peregrinos, muchas veces hemos llenado containers completos de comida, alimentos, medicina, aseo, lo más básico que pueda necesitar una persona en Cuba. Y entonces la delegación cubana las personas que trabajan en la delegación y en la Unión Cubana vienen y hacen una tramitación entre los dos estados y llevan las cosas a Cuba, pero aquí no sé cómo funcionaría.
So there is a way, ¿cómo se llama?
Peregrinos, la iglesia de los peregrinos.
So there's a church, I don't know how to translate it, but there's, okay, for sure.
Most of the people there were from Cuba, so they have contacts from the conference in Cuba, so that they did the transition of going from one to the other.
Okay, so if they go and visit, they can potentially take something that's...
But to send things to Cuba, a person has to take
That's-
it. Otherwise, it's going to disappear once it gets there.
That's what I heard
Yeah.
too, and I was hoping she might have a...
Yeah.
But thanks.
So if you have more questions, you can stay by and visit afterwards. We've kind of gone late, so I would ask Jeremiah to have closing prayer, and then we'll cut you loose. Thanks for staying by.
Our Father in heaven, we thank you so very much that we're able to be here tonight. We thank you for all the ones who attended this evening and wanted to learn more about missions. Lord, please continue to guide and direct each of us in the days ahead. Guide and direct each of your followers in the mission fields today, and impress on our hearts what you'd have each one of us individually do for you. Lord, if you'd have us support missions financially, if you'd have us go, please guide and direct and help us to listen. Lord, we ask that the work that's being done in Cuba would bring you glory, and that the work we did in Cuba a couple months ago brought you glory. Continue to lead and direct in the trips that are coming up later on this year. Please continue to watch over them with safety and your provision, O Lord. We ask that as we go forth tonight, each of us would take a look in our own communities as well and look for needs and fill those needs that are closest to us, as well as looking at needs abroad in other countries. We thank you for being the first and the greatest missionary coming down to this earth, leaving your kingdom to minister to us and give yourself a sacrifice for each of us. Without you, we're nothing, Lord. We thank you and we give you the glory. We ask all this in your precious name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Have a good night. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Hopefully next time I will have my skills brushed up a little more.
That was good.
Vamos en la casa.
Two of those in Spanish.
En español.